Thanks for holding. You're on the air with Gerald Salente.
Yes. Alex, are you there?
Yes, sir.
All right, well, I just want to ask you a question. Have you heard about the cyber attack drill being hosted by the Department of Homeland Security called Quantum Dawn 2?
Yes, it rings a bell.
Yeah. Well, I just want to inform you this. You know how the DHS, they love to put their false flag attacks right next to the drill? Well, I don't know if this is true or not, all right? And I'm not going to say that it is going to happen, but I believe that this is going to be the next false flag attack. What's your take on this?
Gerald?
Well, you know, on the false flag, I believe that we are going to have either a false flag or a real flag, something that is going to divert our attention away from the problems that are around us now. There's going to be a wag the dog moment. And it's also going to wag us away from the economic problems. They're not going to be able to get us out of this economic mess. I mentioned to you that interest rates went up the fastest time in 26 years in a week. And so I think there might be a false flag. It might be a computer. It might be, quote, terrorism.
The game was sponsored by the Bipartisan Policy Center, and it simulated, as you said, a massive cyber attack on the U.S. Former government and business leader played the parts of top officials. There was a fake news channel. The scenario was entirely fictional, but the issues could not be more real.
Up to 20 million and counting of the nation's cell phones have stopped working so far today in what officials claim is the largest communications crisis in the cell phone era.
The reason? A cyber attack. As government officials convene, there is one overarching question.
Is this an act of war, not a criminal act?
The infected smartphones show a video of the Red Army raising speculation the Russians are behind the attack. Meanwhile, the crisis expands.
Instances of identity theft and online financial fraud have increased dramatically.
Officials discuss the possibility of shutting down the infected smartphones, but government can't do it.
I'm actually shocked to hear that we don't have this authority. If this was someone with smallpox wandering through the Super Bowl, we would have the authority to quarantine them.
Can the military assist? What powers does the president have?
We are operating in a bit of uncharted territory, as you know.
The attack is traced to a server in Russia. If the U.S. shuts it down, will the Russians see it as an act of war? And is Russia really behind the attack? Then more grim news. The internet is infected, the power grid impacted.
We are also now receiving alarming reports of significant and growing power outages in major metropolitan areas in the eastern half of the United States.
There is discussion of nationalizing the power grid or mobilizing the National Guard to protect it.
But keep in mind, there are over 160,000 miles of transmission lines. You cannot guard every mile of that.
And the cyber attack goes on.
And in corporate boardrooms and IT centers across the country, our nation's leaders are wondering if their networks are really secure and if this crisis might indeed spread into their systems.
The questions raised by the exercise involve vulnerabilities, roles and responsibilities, legal authorities, private sector cooperation, public messaging, political fallout, military retaliation, defensive capabilities. The goal of the exercise was to put these issues on the table for discussion and perhaps resolution before there's a real and massive cyber attack.
Also in the spotlight in Washington today, President Obama meeting with some top CEOs to talk about the threat of cyber attacks and the huge economic losses that come from computer hacking. The president said he's taking cybersecurity seriously, so seriously that he met with those business leaders in the Situation Room at the White House. Eamon Javers joins us from the White House with more. Eamon?
Hi, guys. Well, it was about a dozen CEOs here at the White House. The White House itself has been a little bit cagey about the list of CEOs who attended this meeting. We staked them out. We didn't see a whole lot of them on their way in or their way out, but we were told that Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan was here. Also, Rex Tillerson of ExxonMobil was expected to attend, and a long list of other top business CEOs from a range of industries. Clearly, this was a meeting that the president said was important for his agenda, and we talked with David Coady, the CEO of Honeywell, On his way out of the meeting, he explained that a lot of the CEOs were really behind what the president had to say. But what Cody also said in that interview was that he wants a light touch from government in terms of regulations and requirements on cybersecurity for companies. Now, that's something that we've heard from other CEOs as well. Clearly, there's a little bit of a point of tension.
You know, Eamon, we've been getting warnings about cyber attacks ever since 9/11, and yet we're still talking about it. We are still vulnerable. Why do you think that businesses and the government have been dragging their feet to fix this problem? Did you get any sense of that from talking to people today?
Well, there's two real reasons for that. I mean, the first one is that it's just very hard to tell who is actually doing these cyber attacks. I mean, tracing them back to their source can be infuriatingly complicated.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode number 95. And the title of this episode is Something Evil is Coming This Summer. And there's a lot to talk about, and there's a lot going on. And we're seeing gold being pushed down again. It's around $1,200 now, and most likely it'll probably go under $1,200. And we're seeing a two-day push now, just like we saw prior to the Boston bombing. And it just so happens to coincide with a cyber attack drill which is called Quantum Dawn 2, which is happening to 50 or so banks, financial firms, and companies on Wall Street, where DHS is having a specialized drill to simulate cyber attacks. And, you know, if you haven't already, I would start removing some money out of the banks, because it's very strange that they decided to do this, and gold is being smacked down, and just something does not feel right. Now, listen, hey, I mean, anything can happen, but just it feels like everything is in alignment, and it feels like something is going to happen. And hey, I would remove my money from the bank anyhow, because of the bail-ins that are eventually going to reach America. And once that happens and your accounts are frozen, that is it. Game over for you. And we saw this happen in Cyprus. And if you haven't taken your money out yet, I would suggest doing so. And especially with this Quantum Dawn 2 drill cyber attack coming up. I mean, what's the worst case scenario? If you don't believe me, or you're like, oh, you know, that's ridiculous, so what? You take some cash out. If nothing happens, you put it back in. What's the big deal? Basically, what the government needs to do before the collapse, and I believe this is going to happen throughout the summer, and we're going to see some crazy events happening during this summer, and it's not going to be pretty. It's going to be downright evil. It's going to scare people who've been sleeping. They are not going to know what's going on.
One thing I forgot to mention was through the Deutsche Bank informant, I was alerted to the idea that they're going to possibly create like an internet virus that would attack the banking system. You know, like they're using Flame and Cessnet. And there's a new cousin of these two that is going around Iran. Mm-hmm. And what they would do was, on a Friday afternoon, they would say, well, we have to shut down the banking system because there's a virus in all the banks. You won't be able to use your ATMs over the weekend, but on Monday morning you'll be fine. Well, if you hear of anything like that, You have 72 hours before they roll out martial law.
So wait a minute, Suzanne, you're saying that if you see anything like that in the news media or otherwise, you have 72 hours? Why don't you repeat that, help people understand what that means?
When they're going to roll out martial law, they think that when the financial collapse hits the shores of the United States, they have 72 hours. So with my Deutsche Bank informant and talks with other people in the alternative media, my contacts, I just think that it's possible that a scenario like this, I'm not saying that this will happen, but a scenario like this, and it would give you something to look for, a little red flag to look for. Let's say that the banks all say that there's a virus in all the banking systems, all of the banks, and they have to shut down like on a Friday. We know that the Obama administration loves to do things on a Friday afternoon or when we're celebrating New Year's Eve. So Friday afternoon, they would say they're going to shut down the banks and get rid of this virus over the weekend. And on Monday morning, everything would be back up. Over the weekend, you wouldn't be able to use your ATM or pay any bills online. But everything will be fine on Monday morning. That is your red flag. You have 72 hours from that moment to do whatever you were planning on doing, get to wherever you were planning on getting to, hunker down whatever you were planning on hunkering down, because they're going to unroll martial law in 72 hours from that moment, whatever scenario they intend to unroll. And I believe that it has to do with the banks, because they're coming for our private checking accounts next. They're looking for as much money as they can to fund this not only domestic but global police state. So like I said, if you hear of anything with the banking industry, and I personally think it might be a false flag with an internet virus or a virus in the banking system as far as their computers go, then you have 72 hours from that time to go ahead and do what you were planning on doing.
Wow. Well, I mean, we don't know if that will happen, but if it does, if people see these signs that Suzanne just talked about, Suzanne, you may have just saved some lives. I mean, for those who live in inner cities, in big cities, in scary places, be it downtown Chicago, New York, L.A., you may have saved some lives. People can get out if they have 72 hours. If they don't have but a couple of hours and there's traffic jams, they're not going anywhere.
Coming up, if you don't live in a major metro area, you might want to pack your bags. Years ago, moving to the suburbs was a sign that you were making a better life for yourself and your family. But our next guest details a government report suggesting there may be a long-term plan to change all that for you. The effort to, quote, Manhattanize America. Next. Well, if you live in the suburbs, don't get too comfy. Our next guest says the Obama administration has plans to push Americans slowly but surely out of the burbs and into the big cities as a means to, quote, spread the wealth around. Joining us now is Stanley Kurtz. He's author of Spreading the Wealth, How Obama is Robbing the Suburbs to Pay for the City. And this isn't based on your book, this claim. This is based on something you actually saw President Obama and the administration do last week.
I had to pull over for a second and get this, guys. Look at this huge area. That guy told me, and look at the fences pointing right inward, and this is in a residential area here. This is a huge staging area. This is what a guy told me. They're setting up a huge staging area. This is definitely something out of the ordinary here. And the fence is facing inward. Look at that. And like I say, this is right here in a residential area, folks. Look at that area. That whole fence line runs all the way down. And you see the barbed wire facing in. That's to keep you in, not out. A guy called me and told me about this, and yep, he was right on the money. There is definitely something going on here. The fence is all the way around. I don't want to get any closer because there's a guard shack right over in the other area. I'm out of here. But yep, the guy that called me and told me about this, he was right on the money. This is definitely, they're setting up for something.